The mentality behind this movie is pretty simple. I'll break it down just like this. King Kong vs. Godzilla was a massive success for Toho. One of the highest grossing Japanese films of all time. One of the most celebrated Toho and kaiju films of all time. It's a legendary movie. Everybody knows about this movie, even if you're not a Godzilla fan. And then there's Mothra from 1961, which is also a very well received film, made Toho a ton of money. So naturally, if you're an executive at Toho and you want to make another monster movie, we've already seen King Kong vs. Godzilla, so you could make a sequel to that like what they're doing with Legendary Pictures Godzilla. Or you could say, let's take Mothra, who made us a bunch of money, so let's throw that in there. And that is how we got to 1964's Mothra vs. Godzilla. This is a very good idea from Toho, and I think it did pay off for them. Now, I want to first talk about the production. Obviously, if you know about these films, you already know this. If you don't, Eiji Tsuburaya returns once again, helps to create a new Godzilla suit in this film, which I think looks pretty good. Even though, if I have to pick, I would say the King Kong one looks a tiny bit better. They do reuse that one at one point, but it is a new Godzilla suit. And then you've also got Ishiro Honda directing it. The old team is back. Akira Ifukube does the soundtrack. He basically... One thing I love about this soundtrack in particular is that he takes the classic Godzilla theme and he sort of uses that leitmotif and remixes it into making new themes here. And I really, really like it. Of course, there's the Mothra theme and all that stuff. So, this movie, interestingly enough, this is the last movie of the Showa era where Godzilla is not the main protagonist, where he's an antagonist in this film. He is the lead villain. And obviously, Godzilla himself is just a force of nature. He's not like wanting to kill people or anything like that. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's an animal, right? But what happens in this film is, if you have to pick between who's a better villain, Mothra or Godzilla, in this case, Godzilla would make the most sense. What I find weird about this is, when this movie came to America, they called it Godzilla versus the Thing. Not like the Fantastic Four thing. It's just Godzilla versus the Thing. I don't know why they didn't just call it Mothra, but whatever. It is what it is. The big story of this film, I must say, first of all, is the big sort of plot is about these eggs. It's about Mothra's giant eggs. So they find an egg at the beginning of the movie, and really the first act of this movie, the first third of it, is all about the egg. It gets stuck on this beach. So they pull the egg towards the shore, and at that point, they don't really know what to do with it. They're not really sure what the story is with it. But much like the previous solo Mothra film, which I loved, by the way, you've got the greedy businessman here, and it gets purchased by a businessman, and he has this company called Happy Enterprises where he wants to use the egg to, attract an audience to it. So the twin fairies make their return in this film, and they're telling them, hey, you got to give this egg back to Mothra. So at this point, I think the movie's trying to tell you that, much like with the previous Mothra film, they're playing with fire here, and the last thing that you want is to have to deal with Godzilla and Mothra both attacking mankind, especially over this stuff. So the three leads try to get the egg away and back to Mothra, but they fail. One of the leads, though, is a reporter by the name of Ichiro Sakai, played by Akira Takarada. And he does great in this movie. Akira Takarada's in a few of these older movies from Toho. And so he writes this article about them. I want to say, first of all, before I get back to that, I really like the characters in this film. I actually really like a lot of these movies, I've noticed the human characters can be a bit of a letdown. But in this film, I do like the characters big time. They're more likable, they're more relatable. It makes more sense. For me, it worked. And there's a few other ones that didn't work. For me, it definitely worked. So they try to incubate the egg, and then what ends up happening is, and I thought this was awesome. So as they're doing this, as they're trying to figure out this whole egg thing, Godzilla awakens. And this is a great scene. Basically, you see Godzilla rise up from this little sort of crater, and he's covered in sand. And they play the Godzilla theme, and he rises up. He's covered in this sand. It just falls off of him. This is a great, great scene. It was epic the way it was shot, a wide shot of it. I think it looked great. And of course, Godzilla's back now and the world is in trouble. So they send out the Japanese self-defense forces to go fight Godzilla. And as you know, that doesn't really go well because Godzilla makes mincemeat out of the army. I do want to say something real quick about that, even though this is later on in the film. Eiji Tsuburaya, right? We talked about, in other reviews about how he's really good at what he does, how he got better with, working with special effects and miniatures and using a lot of practical tricks. And this film uses all of those tricks. The blue screen shots, the little and big camera angles, the suits. This movie does everything. They pull everything out of the trick bag in this film. But one of the new things that this movie did, and if another movie did this, I missed it completely, but maybe it's because it's in color, maybe I missed it in the old Godzilla, but I think this is the first one to do it, where when Godzilla fires the atomic breath on some of the tanks, they actually melt, and you see them like melting, and I thought it was a really cool looking effect, especially for the time. This movie came out in the 60s, and I don't recall seeing that in a previous Godzilla film prior to this one, but Eiji Tsuburaya, again, busting out some new tricks, trying some new things, while also incorporating what he knows how to do. So, of course, when Godzilla awakens, we finally figure out that, hey, we're going to have Mothra help us out. So they go to Infant Island. You have, of course, the twins there, the fairies. You've got the natives there, just like in the previous Mothra film, because they need Mothra to help them out. And then they find out, and this is an interesting tie-in, they find out that there's a lot of issues that were caused by previous nuclear H-bomb tests. And so it's almost like they're implying here, and maybe I missed this, but maybe I missed something, but I don't think I did. They're implying that maybe Mothra was also born from nuclear tests, like with the nuke, like Godzilla. I'm not really sure. It was a unique choice to bring that up. I don't know. Maybe I missed something, but that was interesting. One of the scenes I thought was really satisfying too, that's right around this time, is they have this awesome scene where this character. So there's basically what happens is, without going into too many spoilers, what happens is one of the evil businessmen, steals the money. He shoots the guy in the head, and then he gets stepped on by Godzilla. And that scene was very satisfying. It's not that Godzilla was a good guy, but it's one of those things where karma. Now, what I love, too, is I love how Godzilla, like, way Eiji Tsuburaya did this, Godzilla smashes some different structures here. Like, there's a giant, hotel, and Godzilla just smashes it over. And, it looks authentic. It looks very good. And Godzilla's gonna destroy the egg, basically, not really knowing what he's doing. Mothra shows up. Mothra and Godzilla fight, but Godzilla's atomic breath is too much for Mothra, and that, of course, leads to Mothra going to the egg and, kind of, I don't want to spoil it, but it leads to the egg hatching, and that's where the real kind of battle is. It's actually not Mothra and Godzilla as, the final battle. It's the larva against Godzilla. And, while that's going on, there's also, this group of people that are on the island trying to get them out of there because they're trapped or whatever. And at this point, that's kind of the finale. Now, I will say this, okay? This is where I'm a little bit mixed on this. So, I like that the movie has one good guy and one bad guy with the monsters, Godzilla and Mothra, but it also has good humans and bad humans. I thought that was actually really, that was a good little sort of theme throughout the film. Now, again, Godzilla is not really quote-unquote evil. He's just a force of nature, but I do like how they did that. Mothra is, of course, Mothra represents peace and tranquility. Godzilla represents destruction. That's kind of how this works, right? And I like sort of this idea that if peace cannot happen from one source, it can be passed on to the next. That's kind of the story here. And I really like that. I thought that this film really hammered that theme home. I think some of the later Showa movies don't really do that. They kind of clown around too much. They don't really have thematics. But this one really had a good message to send. But what I was saying about being mixed on this is, I like the Godzilla Mothra fight. I don't think it's as fun as Godzilla vs. Kong, from King Kong vs. Godzilla, I mean. That fight I thought was just awesome. This one wasn't as good, but it was still fun to watch. And the ending of how they beat Godzilla I thought was pretty interesting. It definitely wasn't the same thing that they have done before. And it does leave it open for a sequel. It actually very much leaves it open for a sequel, which I believe the next film is Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, which in that film, Mothra has to work with Godzilla and Rodan to defeat the incoming threat of Ghidorah. But here, this movie felt to me in a way, and this is a weird thing to say because it's not the perspective of when it first came out, but it did feel like sort of an appetizer before you got the main course in the Ghidorah movie. It sort of felt like that, even though that probably wasn't the story here. Obviously, when they made this, they probably didn't know they were going to do another one quite the way they did it, you know. The real highlights of the film is the characters, something that they don't always get right. You know, I mentioned Takarada, Hiroshi Koizumi, Kenji Saraya, Yuriko Hoshi as Junko Nakanishi, she's kind of spunky, has tons of charisma. The villains, human villains, have a ton of charisma too, but they're not played up for laughs as much as they were in the Mothra movie. You know, this is a little bit more serious of a film. There's a few comedic moments here and there, but it really does take itself a bit more seriously and has a lot more heart than a lot of the other Godzilla films. So I feel like even though the monster fight in this film is not anywhere near the level of Godzilla or King Kong versus Godzilla, I still feel like the other aspects of the film do elevate the movie to be a lot better than it actually is. The characters, the good and bad ones, as well as, I gotta say too, man, the Godzilla Mothra, the first fight, short but fun, and the Mothra character herself gets development, and that's something you really don't see from a lot of these monsters. Usually when they show up, they're exactly the same. Here we have Mothra making decisions and being very brave to go against Godzilla, who in this film is portrayed to be an absolute beast, no pun intended. I mean, in this movie, they really do a good job of painting Godzilla as this threat that could wipe out all of Japan. You know, they really take Godzilla's atomic breath very seriously in this movie, and they build him up to be a serious, problem, like a real problem. So there are so many highlights here, and I think the highlights outweigh the lowlights. It is a thumbs up movie for me. Up next is going to be Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, featuring one of the great all-time antagonists making his debut, and that is King Ghidorah, and one of the first multiple monster team-ups ever. So, historic film. I'll be covering it here. Take care of yourself. What did you think about this movie? I'll talk to you next time.